Hey everybody, this is Steli FT with Close, and in today's video we're going to discuss how to avoid one of the biggest mistakes that sales teams make when it comes to building and creating their sales reports. There's three phases of sales reporting and sales reporting sophistication, if you want so. Phase one is where you don't know what you're doing. Phase two is when you think you know what you're doing, and phase three is when you actually know what you're doing, right? And each phase needs appropriate levels of reporting and tracking of data and metrics. So I'll go in a little bit about what these three phases are, how they differentiate, and what tool sets and mindset you should have and bring to the table in each of these phases. And then we'll touch on the biggest mistakes that companies make when it comes to their building of their sales reporting and tracking of their sales metrics, right? So we said three phases. You don't know what you're doing. You think you know what you're doing. You actually know what you're doing. All right, so when you don't know what you're doing, that should be an easy phase. That's when you're just starting out, clean slate. You've not generated any sales yet. Maybe it's just you selling. Maybe you just have a small team that is starting to sell. That's beautiful. That's the beginning, right? At this phase, hopefully you have the humility to know that you don't know anything. And you should be thinking as practically as possible. Right, so in the very beginning, maybe you just have a piece of paper, right, and you keep track of the leads you're going after, your core metrics. How many dials have I made? How many emails have I sent? Right, you can graduate from that to a whiteboard to keep track of high-level pipeline, and then very quickly, hopefully, as you get a couple of deals in and as the ball is rolling, you choose a tool like Close that gives you out-of-the-box solid action-driven reporting, right? So you buy a tool like Close, a CRM tool like Close, and you can focus on selling, making calls, receiving calls, sending emails, following up, negotiating, and the software is keeping track of all the metrics and spits out a simple dashboard of activity-driven reporting using a framework that I've taught before and that we'll link up to here in this video and here in this blog post, of the AQC framework: activity, quality, and conversion, right? So that's what you do when you don't know what you're doing. You start off super simple, scrappy, and then you choose a software tool that takes all the activity that you put in place with your sales team, that allows your sales team and yourself to focus on what matters, which is selling and closing deals, that gives you a high level, high quality kind of funnel report of the main activities that you do in the conversions of those, quality and conversion of those activities. So that's phase one. Now, let's say that we're doing quite all right, and we have somewhat of a repeatability in our sales process, and we start hiring a few salespeople, and we went from maybe just one person selling to 2, 3, 4 people selling to now, closing in on getting to 10 sales reps on our team and starting to think about organization of our sales teams. Here's another video and blog post that we'll link up to, the 3 different ways that you can organize your teams, from the island to the assembly line to the pot. And you start thinking about more process, and you start trying to become more sophisticated. This is when you get into the phase 2 of your sales reporting sophistication, if you want so. And that is that's the phase where companies and teams think they know what they're doing. And that is the most dangerous phase, right? That's where we make the biggest mistakes. We see a little bit of success. We've established a few things that are working, and now we get ahead of ourselves and we think we know everything. This is typically the phase where a sales team will start thinking about super sophisticated sales reports and reporting, and will want to track everything and anything, and will come up with this really complicated structure, and because there's all these metrics we should be tracking and I would want to track. And it's very much driven by trying to create a complete picture. It's very much driven by a desire to be more sophisticated and to grow up. It's very much driven by a desire and by curiosity. Well, I'd like to know how many seconds on the phone do we spend on a deal on the first call versus how many seconds are we on a call in the very last call, and how do the seconds or minutes per call range and go up and down throughout the deal, and how does it compare based on the different segmentation of our customers and based on the different phases of the team. And like this can be very, very complicated. It can get very complicated very quickly, right? When you're like anybody's curiosity, and this is also the time where multiple teams are probably having to interact, right? Marketing, demand gen, success, support, sales, product. All these different teams will want to have some influence and want to drive some insights from what sales is doing and vice versa. And now you have all these different people with all these different questions, and the demand or the ideal of a report or reporting or metrics or dashboards, they skyrocket. And now you want this super sophisticated model. And here's where most startups trip, which is when they try to build this incredible sales report of the future, this super sophisticated data model for sales that will answer all questions and that will highlight what we need to do and that will kind of reflect the level of sophistication that we need in order to scale. This is where most companies trip up, and here's why. You don't really yet know what you don't know, and what you think you know, you don't quite yet know fully. This might be quite confusing, but what I really mean is that you don't know shit yet. And all these, like what happens typically is that these sales teams and sales leadership oftentimes, or sales ops, will spend an incredible amount of effort, time, sometimes money, trying to build these super sophisticated sales reports and models, only to then discover that by the time that you have the sales report, your sales approach, your sales team, your product, your market has completely changed, right? You're in a fast-moving, fast-changing environment. And if it takes you 3-4 months to build this super sophisticated model, the world has changed so much, or your company has changed so much, that it doesn't match anymore. And all this work you poured into this has been wasted. Or on the reverse, let's say you're not changing that fast and you haven't pivoted from a cryptocurrency to an online gaming company, right? Let's say it hasn't been that big of a drastic change. Here's what 99.99999% of all companies discover once they've built this incredible sales reporting dashboard tool or whatever it is. They look at it and they think two things. Number one, holy shit, this is overwhelming. I mean, there's no way to consume this amount of data. Yes, if I have a question and if I spend 15 minutes digging through this, I will find an answer. But it's very hard to keep a pulse on that answer, and it's very hard to really make all this data actionable, right? We want to look at reports in order for them to tell us what to do, what to change, where there are big red flags or where there are big green flags of things we're doing exceptionally well. We want data to speak to us in simple terms and tell us what to do and gives us clear insights that are actionable at this phase. We don't just want data for the data's sake. And the other thing is that a lot of times we thought these are all the metrics we need to understand, to truly understand our model. And then when we look at those metrics and that sophisticated sales reporting dashboard, we realize those are all kind of interesting, mildly entertaining metrics, but they don't paint a picture and they're not that insightful and they're not at all actionable. So then what typically happens is the company will kind of reboot and say, well, now we've done this, but now we know we actually need a totally different types of reporting or with different type of dashboard. So you start from scratch and you start again trying to build this new thing. And usually companies will struggle through this many, many times. Sometimes they'll go down the dark and painful path of wanting to purchase really expensive software and then hire a consultant and an ops person to try to integrate and instrument and customize, only to then realize that it's useless and they have to go again. Oftentimes companies will lose their appetite. They'll go through this exercise once or twice and then they kind of run out of steam and they're like, pfft. And so then everybody's like, well, what sales reporting are we looking at? Do we have a super simple dashboard? No. We don't have a simple dashboard that works. Okay, so where's a sophisticated dashboard that works? Well, we still have that old dashboard that doesn't quite work, that was very expensive. But yeah, I don't know, like everybody kind of is doing their own thing, and the director of sales or VP of sales is running some reports manually and some reports in a spreadsheet and some reports through the CRM and some reports through some other means. It becomes a clusterfuck. And then eventually, hopefully, if you go through this painful phase and you survive and you thrive despite all those things, At some point, you are truly operating at a level of scale where you know what you're doing. Where now you have a sales model and a sales process that is truly established, it's repeatable, that is predictable and scalable. You are building a sales organization that's much more sophisticated, right? You have all these different sales teams, you have sales managers, you have directors, you have a VP of sales, or so you have a whole organizational structure and operational excellence, and you're past the first few million of revenue, you're past the early days of startup selling, and now you'll have a whole data team potentially on your sales team, and you'll invest in reports and a data model and dashboard and business intelligence software that gives you the type of information that you need, that runs the reports on a very sophisticated, very predictable and useful level, right? Those are the three phases. Too many times companies in phase 1 or phase 2 want to be in phase 3. And so what they do is they waste incredible amounts of time, energy, money on the wrong thing, on something that they're not quite ready to build yet, which is highly sophisticated, highly customized, highly detailed-oriented sales reporting and sales metric dashboards. Don't make that mistake. Realizing what phase you're in, and every phase has an appropriate way of dealing with it. Phase 1, where you don't know what you're doing at all, buy a piece of software like Close that's highly actionable. I know I'm biased, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Highly actionable, that kind of gets out of the way of your sales team, allows you to focus on selling, communicating, that gives you simple, beautiful, and activity and actionable reporting out of the box. You don't have to do anything. It's just there for you. You can use it to get better. When you're in phase 2, when things become more and more sophisticated, but you now think you know what you're doing, but you're not honestly quite there yet, at that phase, your best friend, honestly, is software with a strong API. Again, like Close. We have a very, very simple, beautiful, but powerful API that allows you to get all the data out of the tools that your sales teams are using and pump that data into a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is your best friend at that phase because it's the most flexible tool to drive reports, dashboards, and to compute data. And it's cheap. It's flexible, it's simple, everybody knows how to use them. There's people that are black belts in it that you can either hire or that there might be some in the team already. And so you use the data that you have, you pump it into a simple spreadsheet, and you use this very flexible structure of a spreadsheet to keep iterating and improving your reports until you truly know what metrics matter and how to drive reports that truly are meaningful to your business. And at that level, when you're in level 3, it might make sense to invest in really sophisticated, sometimes very expensive business intelligence software, reporting software that will drive these kind of highly sophisticated sales reports and dashboards for you and your business, right? So make sure you know in what phase you're in and you use the appropriate level of sales reporting to empower your team to perform at their best. That's it from me. If you have any questions or any comments, any feedback, you can always get in touch with me, stelly@close.com. And until next time, let's go and get them.